there's a lot of fakers out there. There are people saying they like modern art when they really don't. And I know, I know you could be one of those people watching this video right now. If you actually don't like it, if you don't like it, it's okay. I give you permission as an art school graduate who loves modern art. It's okay if you don't like modern art. But before you say you don't like modern art, let's talk about it. And I say this as someone who absolutely loves modern art, particularly artwork from the 1920s to the 1950s, the period of time actually called modernism. But typically people interpret the term modern art to mean any artwork made after the Impressionist movement of the 1860s. But that's beside the point. Like when people say modern art, I feel like what pops into mind is stuff like this. This is actually postmodernism, by the way. Modern art is so much cooler. I feel like people have the urge to say they like art when they actually don't. And this is for a couple reasons. Maybe it's because they see a huge crowd surrounding some artwork and you think to yourself, there has to be something that I'm missing, that I'm not understanding here. If everyone likes it, there has to be something great about it. Therefore, when someone asks, I have to say, yes, I also like it. I'm also a cool kid that belongs to the cool kid club. I like it. Yeah, sure. I don't quite know what it means, but I'll say that I like it. Or they don't want to admit that they don't understand it. They'll feel dumb to say I don't like modern art because that's admitting to saying you don't know something, don't understand something. And I don't know if you've noticed, but us humans are particularly against saying when we don't know something. We have to be right all the time. We have to be certain about ourselves all the time. So for one reason or another, there's a lot of fakers out there. There are people saying they like modern art when they really don't. And I know you could be one of those people watching this video right now. But I am here today, my sweet summer children, as a voice from the heavens saying, you don't have to keep saying it if you don't actually like it. You're valid, it's okay. But what's more than this validation, this gift, is I'm going to offer you something else. I'm going to offer you the fastest way to understanding modern art in less than 5 minutes. Okay, the quickest way to get it is this. Music has genres, right? Artwork has genres too. They're called periods, eras, movements. You have the Gothic period, the Renaissance, the Rococo, Romanticism, Impressionism, Modernism, Postmodernism, contemporary art, and like so much more. If you have a favorite art movement that I haven't listed here, like comment it below and we'll be best friends. But either way, the point here is you can be a music lover without loving every single genre of music, right? That's an obvious statement. You can love rock while hating classical music, even if your opinion's wrong. But so it goes without saying that you can also be an art lover who loves Impressionism but hates modern art. That's okay. It's all right. I give you permission to not love everything. They're not mutually exclusive. You don't have to admit to loving every genre of music, just like you don't have to admit to loving every art period. I'm looking at you, minimalism. Sorry, that's the one art movement that really irks me. I can't get behind it. I cannot get behind minimalism. And see, I still love art. The love is in the practice, not the message. And that's really what these different art periods are about, right? They all hold a different message. Art is a conversation held throughout time, throughout history. And so with each different movement that happens on the art history timeline, they are responding to the current events that are happening as well as to the art that came before them. And so to say that you don't like modern art just means you don't like one piece of a conversation. Like when you're talking to a friend and they say something you don't really agree with and you're like, I still like you. That didn't make much sense, but I still like you. And it just so happens that modern art tends to be difficult to understand just by looking at it. In a way that artwork that happened before modernism wasn't quite like this. Like anyone can look at a piece from like the Romanticism era and kind of start to understand what's happening there. Like they can look at this image and say, oh, I see so-and-so is trying to do this one thing, you know, like you can kind of get the gist. You can kind of understand it enough to feel feel like you like the art very innately, very naturally. And with modernism, it starts to get away from that a little bit. Unfortunately, you actually do need to have a little bit of art history understanding in order to understand art made after the 20th century. That in itself is a whole different topic that I could get into another time if you're interested in hearing me talk about the snobbery and elitism in the artistic community. And it's pretty frankly anti-art, but just comment below if you're interested in that whole side tangent, but maybe I'll get around to making that video someday. But we are here to talk about modern art. So I am going to give you a little bit of context so that you can decide once and for all if you actually do like modern art. So before we hop right in, I do want to say there's links in the description for a lot of cool stuff that I do. I'm a cool person. Can't say that. Can't say that. But I have something that's really, really awesome called the Small Joys Club. My mission is to discover and spread the small joys of the world inside of artwork. So if you want to join the Small Joys Club, in the description, learn more about it. I also have a cute little shop. So if you are all about Target sprees and journaling or know someone who is, that holiday season's coming up, right? Cozy kinds of stuff. Book readers, usually book readers like it. Original art, get it. Anyway, if you haven't already noticed, I'm wearing the coolest earrings in the world right now. Anyway, we're here to talk about modern art. Here we go. So first, let's get a little bit of a vocab lesson, and I promise I'm gonna try to make this as fun as possible. I find words fun. I find vocab fun, and therefore my enthusiasm, my love for vocab is gonna rub off right on you. This is not your third grade English teacher's vocab lesson. This is Jen Carmiel, the chaotic small joys gal here, dragging you along for the lesson. So when you look at art, it falls into a couple different categories, the easiest of which being representational or abstract, meaning does it actually look like the real world? Does it look like what you're trying to depict? If you're trying to paint a hat, does it look like a hat? Or a person look like a person? But what's interesting to me here is it's not as clear cut as representational or abstract. Instead, it's a spectrum. You can have abstract art that is also representational. To be abstract is to exaggerate one or more of the elements of art, which are the ingredients that you use to cook up the art. For instance, when we look at Matisse, Woman with a Hat, it's an exaggeration of color, one of the elements of art. What are the elements of art again? I don't know if I remember. So when you create artwork, right, you have the elements of art. Let me actually Google those. I didn't write this into my script. This is just off the cuff. Elements of art that were on the wall of my high school, my middle school and high school art classrooms. Okay, here are the elements of art. So when you look at artwork, it is comprised of these ingredients. It has lines. Ooh, it has shapes. It has space. It's value. It's form, texture, and color. Artists can exaggerate different elements for a lot of different reasons. A lot of times, exaggerating different things can evoke more emotion, make more emphasis fall on one area or another. And so when you're looking at art that has been abstracted, you can ask yourself, what purpose does the abstraction hold? Is there a reason the artist chose to make these strokes so distinct, so bright, so soft, so hidden, so prominent? Like, why did they make these choices? That's the really awesome thing about abstract art, is it causes you to ask all of these questions. And I don't know if you've noticed, but I'm a very questionable kind of person, so I love me some questions. Some argue that the first introduction of abstract elements into painting was in the Impressionist era, because of how obvious the brush strokes were, and because you're starting to simplify shapes and values. But to the eyes of someone who's living in the year 2024, I don't think we would call this abstract art that easily, would we? And then you have something like Matisse's Woman with a Hat, painted in 1905. We can still clearly understand that this is a woman wearing a hat. It looks like a person, it looks like they have a hat on. The subject itself is representational, but the colors are abstract. There's green on her face right there, you know, like that's not real life. And what is this weird stuff behind her, like this brushing that's not actually real behind her? She's not in an office space, she's not in a bedroom, you can't tell where she is in space, and the background is abstract. That is clearly not a representational background. But let's compare that to Kandinsky's first abstract watercolor, painted in 1910, which is credited for being the first non-representational abstract work of art. Although some might argue that because Kandinsky had chromesthesia and he likely painted what he saw when he heard the sounds, there might be a smidge of representationalness in there. I don't know. Either way, I hope you're starting to understand how abstract art can be a wide spectrum. So when you look at artwork and don't quite get it, you can ask yourself, is it representational or is it abstract? And then you can ask, where does it fall on the spectrum? Can I tell what the subject is, but there's something else going on there? Or do I not even know what I'm looking at? You can ask yourself, what purpose does the abstraction hold? When you enjoy abstract art, you can kind of start to identify what kind of art you like to look at, the same way that you identify what kind of music you like to listen to. Like, oh, I like music with electronic elements. I like music with interesting lyrics. I like music that has a good beat, some heavy drums. I like music that's acoustic, quiet, or chill. The same way you can say sentences like that, you can say sentences like, I like artwork that's representational and has some abstract elements. I like to know what I'm looking at, but I also like to see the emotional expression behind the strokes. Leading us to our next lesson, mark making, or as I like to call it, the presence or lack thereof of the artist. First, I'm going to give you some historical context, and then I'm going to give you some practical advice on how to apply this context and look at the artwork. Because like I mentioned, modern art does require some amount of art history knowledge to kind of really understand what you're looking at. So here's the context. Originally, when artists were first a thing, painting their little lives away, before photography was invented, it was crucially necessary and a lot of times like politically required for the artist to be invisible. And what that means is that they wanted the painting to be a perfect window into an image without visible brush strokes. You were supposed to forget that you're looking at a 3D object, a product mixed of color pushed around on a canvas by an actual person, a real human being's hand. Forget about it. And instead, you're just looking at an image. It's this elevated form of art, right? And it was only with the Impressionist movement did brushstrokes first start becoming intentionally visible in painting. And people were in absolute outrage. They were so mad about it, more mad than one person has a right to be. Actually, I don't know quite how mad because I wasn't there, so I can't put words in mouths. The person who named the Impressionist movement was a critic who looked at Monet's Sunrise Impression painted in 1872 and said this: "That's not a painting, that's an impression of a painting." It's supposed to be insulting, but like all weakly hurled insults, it stuck and later was reclaimed as a truly keen and astute observation of the way that these paintings were created. They were the impression of the subject they were painting. Anyway, yada yada yada, time marches on, and art keeps being made throughout all of history. And you later have the modernist movement that happens in the early 1900s, which has an emphasis on the material of paint. No longer are we looking at a window into another world or a memory or a story, no more narratives. We are talking about the actual physical thing. We're talking about paint. We're talking about paint, man. This is what we're talking about. You are looking at an actual person who made a thing. That was the message of modernism or expressionism. I don't know, it all kind of blurs together. And this is the perfect time to start leaning in to the mark making part, the advice part of all this. Here is how you look at art. So with all of that context out of the way, with people being really mad about the fact that people can now see brush strokes and remember that human beings actually paint things, crazy. Here is how you can look at art. You can ask yourself, how obvious is it that a toddler sat in front of a canvas and kind of had a tantrum with some paint? Serious question. No, but really, that's kind of how these paintings come across, right? To the lay person's eye, it's kind of like the artwork elicits the response. What are you doing? Like, I could do that, you know? It's this childishness, and that's why Picasso is quoted for having said, "It took me how many years?" Let me look up the actual quote. Picasso child art quote. Here it is. "It took me 4 years to paint like Raphael and a lifetime to paint like a child." So the thing to really look at here is essentially art started to become more about the identity of the artist, the expression of a human, rather than an avenue for storytelling, right? The 20th century was all about isolating different parts of art making. So all of these different elements that I listed before comes full circle, comes right back around. You're gonna take the narrative aspect and take that out because that belongs to writing. You're gonna take form and you're gonna take that out because that belongs to sculpture. And you're gonna stick with just painting, trying to make painting as pure as possible, that this is the only thing, that painting is a painting with a capital P. It became a lot more intellectual, didn't it? It became a lot more intellectual than just painting silly little paintings. People started to think. Ugh. Don't get them thinking. Anyway, we were talking about mark making. Mark making happens in artwork because the artist intends to evoke an emotional response solely from the physical marks that are on the page or the canvas. Rather than telling you a palatable story, they are making you feel something. A palatable story that's easy to read and understand has an obvious lesson at the end that when you look at it standing next to another person, you both tell the same story, right? You can say, oh, I'm looking at a painting of someone who is winning the French Revolution. I don't know. I picked that painting out of thin air and maybe I interpreted it wrong. Shoot, that's the wrong. Ugh. But you get what I mean. You understand me. You know what I mean. We're both looking at a person holding the French flag. You can tell the same story. That's what I mean. You get it. But when you both look at something like this, it's like, and you both start to talk about it together, it's like, what does it mean though? What does it mean? So artwork became so much more about what do you feel, what are you talking about, what are you thinking about? It's a big question mark, isn't it? Works that incorporate this diverse, wild mark making are often the result of a frustrated, anxious, angry, or just wildly expressive artist unleashing themselves upon the canvas. That's where we get the term expressionism, because you're expressing yourself in the most honest and authentic way that you can. And very similar to a certain genre of music that can be emotional, raw, out of tune, shouty, screamy, not employing the proper singing techniques. It might not be everyone's jam, but it is some people's. The same way that modern art is just this out of tune little crazy mess that's just and you know, it's not everyone's jam, but it is some people's jam and it is mine, okay? Let me tell you why. Let me show you a painting and let's talk about this painting together. This is William de Kooning's, it's one of his women painted in the Woman series, painted between 1950 and 1953. So I don't know what it is, but when I look at this painting, it is just so fun to look at. And that's the thing with abstract art, right? Sometimes we don't have the words, we just have the feeling that transmits when we look at it. And I personally get really excited by all of these shifting colors, the way that your eye just kind of dances everywhere on every corner of the canvas, trying to figure it out, like trying to understand what's going on there. I love the spilling marks, like these dripping moments, these like scratchety-ness. I love that. I love the desaturated whites and grays next to these vibrant orange and yellows. I love how your brain wants to turn it into something. I love how you want to read into the representational quality of what it should be. A woman, but ultimately you stop short and you're inevitably reminded that it's just paint. It's like your brain can't quite decide what you're looking at. It's like, is it a person? Is it paint? Who knows? The brain is kind of triggered to ask a lot of questions when you're looking at abstract art. And I find that the inquisitive state, that curiosity state, the unanswered questions that are prompted and probed at, that is what makes me love abstract art so much. Like, I love that it's not straightforward. I love that anytime I look at this, it can be something different. I love that I can write my own story and it can be whatever I want it to be. I love how it asks questions that make me think about my own life, that make me want to figure things out. And I love how I can look at this with one other person and neither of us sees the same thing. I love that we can start a conversation with this one thing and probably go about it for a while because there's a lot to understand, a lot to unpack here. I love the expansiveness. I love how there's no right, no wrong, just exploration, just color, having a conversation. So those are two helpful things you can do to understand art a little bit better. You can ask yourself, is it representational or abstract? And then ask yourself, where does it fall on that spectrum? You can also ask yourself, what does the mark making mean? What does it make me feel? What is it trying to tell me? That might give you a little bit more insight into whether or not you actually like the art you're looking at. And it's absolutely okay if you don't like it. I can't tell you how many museums I walk into and just walk right out of because I just don't like it, and that's okay. There's no shame in saying that this style of art is just not your jam. It's just not your bread and butter. It's not your PB&J. It's not your coffee, tea, I don't know. We're out of the food metaphors now. And also, you know what? Some artwork you might have respect for from an art history standpoint. I'm looking at you, Deschamps. I respect you, but I wouldn't like it if someone made another one of you. Like, if someone made it again, you'd probably be like, why would you do that? why are you doing that? Stop that, please. There's no right or wrong way to enjoy the art that you're looking at. But I figure having some additional tools or some additional vocabulary might be a little bit helpful. Let me know what you think. I think I've rambled on here long enough. Should I make another video describing even more art vocab or take you with me to an art museum? Let me know in the comments below. As always, spending any amount of time here on this channel with me is a gift. Such a gift. So much fun. I love doing this stuff, and you people make it possible. So thanks for coming back time and time again. One people I can rely on. Anyway, I really do consider it a gift, and for that, this humble artist says thank you. Anyway, if you haven't already noticed, I'm wearing the coolest earrings in the world right now. Very cool, right?